Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Teach, and I'm Chair of the Department of Pediatrics, and it's my great pleasure to open the 2017-2018 Grand Rounds series. It's going to be a great series, and I have two very specific things to ask of everyone here. Number one, come often and bring a friend. And if you're online, grab somebody and pull them in front of the monitor to watch with you. The lineup for this year is especially exciting, building on the tremendous momentum of last year. Request number two is just a general housekeeping issue. Please silence all your pagers and phones out of respect for our speakers. That applies today and throughout the year. And to our trainees, laptops are down, covers are down, unless you're doing really essential patient care issues. So with that in the way of welcome, I'll ask Dr. Steinhorn to please introduce our speaker today, Dr. Carla Cheatham.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm David Steinhorn. Many of you don't know me, in fact. I'm the medical director of the palliative care program and have been involved in palliative care since the mid-90s, as well as trying to focus on supporting the human being, the human spirit within the frail bodies that we're all charged with caring for. That's a major thrust of mine. And today's Grand Rounds is part of a mini symposium that we're having, Grand Rounds from 8 to 9 with Dr. Cheatham, who I'll introduce in a moment. From 9 to 10, we're having actually a panel discussion with some of the institutional leaders on what it means to be more mindful in our care of patients, what it means for our institutions to be more mindful and thoughtful. And the hope is that we can create some sort of a shift in the overall approach to how we care for patients to make it more compassionate, more holistic, more comforting, and potentially more healing. Then from 10 until noon, there is a 2-hour workshop led by Grace Ogden in mindfulness-based stress reduction, both providing self-caring kinds of ideas. There will be nursing CEUs offered for that, as well as then suggestions on how to use these approaches to take care of our patients, to approach patients, to be more present with patients. And then at 12 noon, there's going to be an hour resident noon conference led by Dr. Kathy Kemper, who is an international superstar in the field of pediatric integrative medicine. In fact, many would say was the originator and founder of the whole discipline of pediatric integrative medicine over the last 20 years or so. So with that, there will be a short question and answer period at the end of Dr. Cheatham's presentation. I'll introduce her very briefly so that we can get on with things. But before I do that, I would also like to mention that this Grand Rounds is known as the Joshua Stout Symposium. Joshua Stout was a patient who suffered meningococcemia in 1991 and passed away. His father, Jerry, and his sister, Danny, are here in the audience today. And part of this is to demonstrate that memories never die. Good memories never die. Hard memories don't die. The part of what we do in healthcare is to help support families through the good and the bad times, and that we hope to find meaning in the difficult times and the challenges that families face. One of the ways to find meaning is through the type of mindfulness work that some of our experts are going to discuss today. Meaning comes at many, many different levels, but the meaning provides lessons that I think continue throughout one's lifetime, because loss never ceases being loss, and our sadness over loss never ceases, but it does change over time. It changes as we grow and mature. We in pediatric medicine, I think, recognize that very deeply, that the psychological reaction of a very young child is different from that of a school-age adolescent or adult individual, and that what we do as we work through the developmental continuum is be aware of the need to find the meaning, to find the lessons, to revisit the losses of the past and see how they live within us at this time in our lives, in this phase of our lives. And that's really part of what this is kind of a kickoff to as well. It's not something that we talk about a whole lot in the clinical setting, but it is actually the foundation and resides below everything that we do in clinical medicine, whether the children survive and go home, which 95% of our kids do, or whether they don't survive and we end up having to have memorial services for them in the future. So this is meant to be mindful, it's meant to be intentional, it's meant to be conscious, it's meant to be a different flavor of a grand rounds without necessarily a lot of data. And I want to just show you something here briefly. So this is a picture that Joshua Stouck's sister, Danny, painted. She was 2.5 years old approximately when Joshua suffered from intratoxemia and died in the PICU here. She painted this picture when she was about 12 years old. And I don't know how much of this you can see, but this is an adolescent girl wearing high heels and a skirt and embracing a probably male figure here based upon the trousers. There's a halo over his head and there are wings on his back. And so this is really a reflection at many, many levels of the depth of memories, the associations that go along with loss. And if you look at this, I don't see sadness in this picture, personally. I actually see a lot of positivity, a lot of good memories, and I see a lot of peace. I see a lot of peace where this picture tells me that she's not worried about her brother. She's not worried about his soul, but she is connected with it throughout all of those years, and she sees him being in a good place and providing comfort for her as well. So there's a lot of meaning in this, and I think that we should recognize the depth of the experiences that our patients have, remembering that palliative care focuses not just on the child who is dying, but actually, perhaps more importantly, on the family and the siblings that will survive, and that is a lot of what our emphasis is. And one of the keys to being able to care for patients in this context is, and families in this context is, how can we be present and how can we care for these families? So that's what today's symposium is about. So my brief introduction to Carla Cheatham is that Carla has been an expert for the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. She has a Master's of Divinity as well as a doctorate in health and kinesiology. She is on faculty at a couple of institutions, and she's been serving faith communities and directing interfaith nonprofit organizations supporting worker justice for many years. She's a keynote speaker at a wide range of organizations speaking about presence and attunement, compassion, fatigue, and resilience, ethical, spiritual, existential care, and a lot of the things that I think really do impact us if we're open to seeing how they fit into our practice. She's been the author of a couple of books, with another one coming out in 2017 on the art of presence for those who are suffering. So Carla is a good resource and a great resource. We look forward to hearing what she has to say and then questions afterwards. Thank you, Carla. Please.
I believe I am live. Thank you very much, David. And thank you to the faculty and the committee for bringing me in and introducing me and having me come and be a part of Grand Rounds and kicking off the symposium, as well as to the Stockburn family and Jerry and Danny and Mindy as well. It's been had a great time getting to know many of you last night. And I am certain I could speak on behalf of the Children's National Family by saying thank you for trusting them, us as caregivers, with your child so many years ago, and with your family, and also trusting us with his memory, to honor him in this way, and for trusting us with your journey and letting us be a part of that. and a part of your story. Where we did well, we're grateful. Where we did not, we're sorry. And we commit to always growing and learning and getting even better for the next family and the next and the next. So thank you. It's an honor. So how do we grow in our ability to be mindful for our own sake and to be mindful for those with whom we serve? Now, I try to be very careful not to call them our patients. I do a lot of training around boundaries, and one of the things that can prevent compassion fatigue is to maintain an adequate sense of boundaries. And when we start to think of them as our patients, it puts us in a dangerously paternalistic mindset. We want to avoid doing that in medicine because we never want to forget that we don't own them. They are not ours. This is their journey, not ours. We just get the privilege of being present with them. So if I slip, holler out and say something, because I try not to call them mine or ours. But the patients with whom we work and the persons whom we serve and the families for whom we care. So how do we be present with them in a way that is healing, is protective of us, and supportive of them on their journey? So why do we even want to consider this? We know that when we see patients and families, that they are experiencing not just the primary loss or the threat of loss of illness or disease. In hospice and palliative care, which I've served in for about 10 years as a chaplain, hospice chaplain and bereavement coordinator and grief counselor, we know that we have persons who, when they are under that existential threat of loss, they also are facing many secondary losses as well. The impact on their sense of control, or feeling that they have a sense of meaning, or their identity and their personhood can also be threatened as well. And while they are facing these things, we know from the literature that communication and trust go hand in hand, that when patients and families feel comfortable and safe, and feel like they have a provider who communicates well to and with them, then they have better outcomes. They have more trust, greater treatment adherence, they have greater satisfaction scores. Not that any of us in healthcare these days have any concern about outcome satisfaction scores, but the outcomes tend to be better. In 2012, I had just completed a half marathon and a couple of triathlons, was preparing to do a century ride, a race, a 100-mile bike race, and an Olympic distance triathlon when a shoulder started tweaking that led to an MRI that led to me being in my doctor's office at 7:30 one night with her handing me the report saying, I know you know the big words, I'm just going to have you read through it and then tell me what questions you have. And suddenly the C word was on the table, and I wound up in an oncologist's office on the wrong side of the bed going, what am I doing here? These people are sick, I am not, as they thought that I might have cancer. And so for several months, we thought that I did. During that period of time, when I finally wound up in the office of an oncologist and talking with him about the surgery we were going to do, and I'm grateful, I'll go ahead and tell you the end of the story. Thankfully, it was not cancer, but during that 4 or 5 months, when sitting in the surgeon's office, I sat there trying to talk with him. And, you know, I get to teach, as a friend of mine jokes, who's a neonatal nurse practitioner, she's like, Carla gets to teach doctors how to be human for a living. And so I'm grateful to be able to show up and talk to professional providers about, all across the spectrum and all disciplines, about how we truly show up for people. And so I can't help but grade clinicians when I see them. I try really hard to be nice about it, but I can't help but do so from the time they walk in the door, whether they look me in the eye and shake my hand and greet me by name and tell me their own or not. So from the very first few seconds, they either have me or I'm going, mm-hmm. So in talking with him, as I was asking him questions, I had a hard time getting him to stay in the room long enough, to sit long enough. He would not look at me. I couldn't get him to answer my questions. When he did answer them, he was so far over my head, I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. And I know a few more medical words than the average bear. I'm not an MD, but I have a lot of training and background in health and kinesiology, and so I understood a lot of it, just enough to be scared. But as he spoke with me, I thought, I am not feeling safe with him. I'm not feeling connected with him. And I know the research that says if I don't feel safe and trusted in my provider, I will not have as good of an outcome. I cannot go into surgery and let him work on me if I don't feel comfortable. I've got to do something. I either need to go someplace else. I don't know if I can trust him. So I went to a friend of mine who is a physician, and I said, I need help. I don't know if he's just so brilliant he's forgotten how to talk to mere mortals, or if he just doesn't know how to connect. I don't know or if I should cut and run because I don't need to trust him. And so she went with me. She cleared her schedules and went with me to the next visit. And She just sat and listened while I asked questions and tried to get answers and tried to understand his answers. And finally, afterward, we walked outside, and she turned and took me by the shoulders, and she said, "He is so smart, he's forgotten how to talk to mere mortals. But he does know what he's talking about. You're safe. You can trust him." So my trust in her, my safety with her, feeling heard and seen and witnessed and understood and cared for by her was the bridge that I needed. But bless his dear little heart. Hopefully he will learn at some point how to be able to show up in a different way. Because we do know from the research that we do not have as good of outcomes across the board if we do not communicate in a way that they feel heard and seen and comforted and respected and understood. And when they are facing all of these primary and secondary losses and threats and they're struggling, what they most need is for us to be grounded and present and connected and to know that we see them and we hear them. They deserve nothing less than our being fully present and attuned, not just grounded and centered in us, but attuned to what is going on in them, noticing what is going on and coming up inside of us and coming up inside of them so that we can respond appropriately. Now, you may have heard about attunement and attachment. You may have heard about the early monkey mama studies when Harlow and the monkeys in the 30s. When the baby monkeys had the option between the wire monkey mama that would feed them food, but it was just wire, that would feed them and give them food and water, but they also had the option of the soft, cuddly, coochie-cooey mama monkey that the wire was covered with soft fabric or carpet. They would always choose the soft, warm, fuzzy rather than the feeding monkey mama. And so we know that we cannot underplay what attachment can do. We know from the parent-child attachment, the struggles that some may have, how that can cause tragic issues for them in their neurochemistry and their threat response. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But we know that from attachment, that having a strong sense of attachment with someone that we know that we're safe with and who cares about us makes a tremendous difference in our physiology. That literally changes our brains for good or for ill, depending upon whether we do or don't feel connected. We know that it helps to know that there's someone who always has our back, who cares for us, and who is always there with us. We may have heard of the studies where, in the attunement studies, when they would have the infant looking at mama, and mama was giving the coochie-coo face, and when mom would then look away, the child would go, "Hey, mom," and start to scowl, which is a bid for attention. The clinical term, a bid, and so it would start to scowl. Mom's still looking down, and they would start to kind of fuss. Hey, hey, hello, I'm here. Look at me, because it's hardwired into our DNA to be seen and to be heard and to know that the primary caretaker is looking out for us. And so as the baby would begin to fuss and bid and get more and more anxious and upset and going, "Hey, I'm," and crying or wailing, then the mom would look back. And the baby's like, "Okay, it's good now. Mom sees me, it's all safe." But then when they would video mama's face, the coochie-coo, nice, warm, smiling face, and put the infant in front of the video of mama's face. At first, the baby's like, "Oh, look, that's mama. That's all good, mama's coochie-coo face." And then as the baby's like moving around and looking around, is realizing the video face of mama is smiling, but isn't tracking where the infant is going. Wait, mama's not tracking. Mama doesn't really, oh, this is not good. Mama's smiling, her face is still warm and soft and fuzzy, but mama's not seeing, wait a minute, and starts to scowl and starts to bid and then starts to wail, and then the researchers like, get the baby back to mama so that we don't have to do therapy for the child for the rest of its life. So the attunement piece, it's hardwired into us. We want to know that we're being seen. And if we don't feel like we are being seen, it will stimulate the threat response system inside of us. So, in psychology, and I began my career, my first master's in psychology, and I worked for years in child and family therapy. And we know from our work, and also working in crisis counseling, the importance of the therapeutic alliance, that interpersonal neurobiology, again, that our connections literally change our neurochemistry and change our brain, that when we feel a threat, a sense of connection can decrease our sense of that threat, and when we don't feel a connection, it can increase our sense of threat. We know that when someone is present and attuned that when they give us that warmth, the kind eyes, as they're called, that it can bring about and open up in us this sense of responsiveness and the sense of safety and security. And from that place, persons can literally repair old states. And again, any damage that might have been done to the brain or the neurochemistry in early development from trauma can start to be healed and repaired. And the amygdala that's been freaking out for years from being overly stimulated can start to go back to normal size. Many of you may have heard of the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. If not, please go to the CDC website. CDC and Kaiser began as a study of the precursors for adult obesity, and they were looking at childhood experiences, and in the midst of asking the questions, one of the researchers messed up asking the questions and meant to say, how much did you weigh at the onset of your first menses? And instead got a couple of questions mixed up and asked, what was your weight at the time of first intercourse? And then he went, oh, wait, and was trying to correct himself before he could. The participant answered 40 pounds. What? And she said, it was my uncle. I was 4 years old, and burst into tears. So they went back and they started asking the question of everyone, and they found that in this adult obesity study, 100% of the participants had experienced sexual assault or sexual molestation as a child. So they expanded the study, and they came up with these 20 adverse childhood experiences that someone could experience that went from having abuse and neglect, having alcoholism or other substance abuse in their family, a parent in jail, a divorce, any number of those. And they found that about 2/3 of the society in the U.S. have at least one of those adverse childhood experiences. And if they have 4 or more, they are 700% more likely. It wasn't a typo. We all thought so when we first started reading the studies. 700% more likely to struggle with addiction with alcohol or other drugs. We have an epidemic of unresolved, undiagnosed, and untreated trauma in our society. And so what they started finding in the longitudinal study, because the CDC has been following this now since '95, what they started finding is that they could predict, even when they controlled for behavioral factors, smoking, drinking, sedentary lifestyle, et cetera, even when they controlled for those, they could predict pancreatic cancer, COPD, emphysema, cancer in people well and later in life, into their 50s and 60s. So clinicians across the country are learning ways to change their protocols to ask the right questions. So if you haven't read up on the ACE study, please do so. It's critical that we as clinicians, all of us, regardless of our discipline, be prepared to notice and ask and respond to undiagnosed and unrecognized or untreated or unresolved trauma. Because when we can be present with people, it can heal those old states. Just by our presence and the connection that we provide, we can help to heal that. Now, again, a little bit more about the theory, and then we're going to jump right into practice in just a moment. So we know from the theories of health behavior that, in short, when someone experiences or perceives a threat to their health, if they have the perceived efficacy, skip ahead because these are just health behavior theories you may know about, but all basically say this. When we perceive a threat, we believe that we have the tools, resources that we need to be able to respond to that threat. And when we feel like we have adequate support around us to respond to that threat, then the outcome is much more likely. It's much more likely that we will change our behavior and that we'll have a good outcome. And so when we can create an atmosphere of comfort and trust and connection, then again, they're more likely to adhere to treatment, they're more likely to come back and follow up on tests as needed, they're more likely to disclose to us what is really, really happening, and the outcome, satisfaction, the perception. Now again, satisfaction is not the difference between what they want and what we do. Satisfaction is the difference between what they want and what they think that we do, what they perceive that we do, which is why being grounded and centered is huge. But we also have to be mindful not just of ourselves, but also mindful of them. Because if we're not mindful of what's going on with them, we will miss that they don't believe that we're tracking. We will miss their bids for connection from us, and their satisfaction will be less. So we have to be mindful of what's going on in them and be able to respond appropriately. So we know that so much of communication is not just what we say, but it's our tone and our body language. It is, I was given a speech recently to the Texas Medical Directors Association, the Texas Geriatric Society, and I was replaying a situation I'd just seen in a workplace where a new manager, an organization for whom I have been doing some consulting, a new manager came in because they had been beaten up. And so the new management was brought in to try to help heal and repair things. And as this manager sat around the table with the staff and was listening to them and saying, tell me what's been working, tell me what hasn't been working, they were scared to answer. They had been so beaten down by the previous management. And so as she sat there, they slowly started talking, they slowly started listening because they saw she had nothing in her hands. She was leaned back in her chair, not in a disengaged way, but in a I ain't going anywhere way. And as she sat there and exuded presence that she was there, and finally one of the social workers, one of the nurses, started to eke out some of their concerns and complaints and struggles. And as this person, this manager, heard them, there came a point when she heard something that was pretty atrocious that was going on in the system, and she leaned forward and she pointed at them and she went, I have got your back. And every time I replay that, I get the same reaction from people who are like, whoa. Because there's something about, you can say, oh, I've got your back. I've got your back. It's not nearly as effective as embodying and going, I've got your back. It oozed out of her pores. Every cell of her being was communicating to them that she meant it, and they believed her, and the energy in the entire room relaxed and opened up. And they began talking. And I have seen a quicker turnaround in that team than I've seen in just about any other organization with whom I've worked. They've had a really quick turnaround because this manager was effective being the change that she was willing to bring. So we must be mindful of how it is that we really, truly speak to them, not just with our words, but with everything else in our being, that we are really there with them. Now, what can get in the way of our being able to be present? If we have our own discomfort with suffering, if we have not come to terms with it and understood our own suffering, John S. Savage writes that you can enter the pain of another only at the level that you have entered your own. And so if we want to be present with them, we need to not have, however it is that I tend to deflect and defend and deny my own pain, busyness, noise, food, Ben and Jerry's, whatever it is that I tend to use to block out my pain is probably what I will use to block out yours. And so if I can't hear me and my pain, how can I ever be present with yours? If I can't be still and quiet with me, how can I ever expect that I can be still and quiet and really hear you? And so if we are worried about feeling out of control, if I actually raise up emotion, give them an opportunity, open up the door to give them the chance to ask questions and have emotions and have feelings, I don't know if I'm going to know what to do with them. I may say the wrong thing. I may go deer in the headlights and run and just abandon them. I may get anxious and do what I can often do and use all these words to flood over the situations and not really have to touch their pain. I can go into spot mode and go into logic and expect them to be able to shift out of their anxiety state and go into the prefrontal cortex and have good logic and say, well, at least, and all the things that we can tend to do when we're faced with suffering, when we get uncomfortable. Those defense mechanisms that protect us and do a really good job, so long as we are aware of them and manage them and don't let them manage us in the midst of the patient interaction and family interaction. And so if we feel like we need to fix it, because our boundaries are improper and we feel like we have to take care of them. One of the strongest, most consistent predictors, again, of compassion fatigue is a sense of improper boundaries, feeling that we must take care of all of their needs and all of their concerns. And so trusting them that this is their journey and they will find their way, we don't need to fix it for them, that they will find their way, can let us find a place to stand to be present with them, but without taking on too much of their journey as our own, for our sake and for theirs. We'll talk more about that in a second. And so we don't want to do anything. We want to be aware of what our relationship is with suffering and with pain and with emotions. If we have our own attachment issues, if we are anxious avoidant and we don't like that intimacy thing too much, that's just way too fuzzy woo-woo feely, you don't like it, don't want to do it, or whatever it is that goes on inside of us with intimacy and attachment and seeing and being seen. So I think it's one of the things that we most crave, and also what scares the snot out of us the most is to be seen by others. to really be seen. We want it and crave it, and yet it's scary. So whatever it is that may lead us to be uncomfortable and to not respond appropriately to suffering, we need to be mindful of. So if you're in the back of the room, you can't see, I'll say, there's no easy way I can tell you this, so I'm sending you to someone who can. Having those difficult conversations is not easy. And of course, we get uncomfortable. Please hear me. If I am stepping on any toes, if you have moments of say something like, ooh, but I've said that. Ooh, I've done that. Oh, yeah, I do that. Please, bless you, please hear, this is not an invitation to shame. None of what I'm saying is an invitation to shame. We are human. It's hardwired into our DNA to get back from the hot stove instantaneously. We are hardwired to pull back from suffering. And so, of course, we can get uncomfortable when others are suffering and we can't fix it, when we can't make it all go away, when we don't know if there are going to be answers, and we don't know if the answers are going to be the ones that they want and are hoping for, the ones that we want and are hoping for. Of course, it is uncomfortable to be around suffering and pain and to be with people in the midst of their emotions. And despite all of our protocols and all of our tools and all of our education and any letters behind our names, I believe that our single greatest clinical competence is the ability to be present, to be mindful of what's going on in us, what's going on in them, and what's going on between us. Because I can have all the best tools in the world, but if I'm not personally centered and grounded well enough to wield them, I will be ineffectual at least and dangerous at worst. And none of us got into this field to be dangerous. So, when we feel like we need to pick up and carry their pain and their suffering and the struggles, we can remember Megan Devine, who is a grief writer, refugeingrief.com. I recommend her work to folks interested more in grief. As a young widow, she has written quite a bit about it. She says some things in life cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. Being present with it is the key. So compassion, the difference between compassion, empathy, and sympathy on the extremes. So compassion is we want to have compassion, and yet compassion to feel with, if we feel with them too much, that we over-identify with their feelings, then we can get too sucked into the story for our own good and for theirs. And with sympathy, that's when we can get to the point where we treat them, you know, have you ever had someone go, oh, I'm so sorry, and you feel like they're pitying you and treating you like you're broken, need to be fixed? That doesn't feel good either. And so sympathy can also be a very disconnected way of, I feel sorry for you, but not really connection. So empathy is that sweet spot in the middle of I can have some perspective taking, of understanding and empathizing with your pain and your struggle and your position, but I'm not going to take it on. So it's the difference between jumping into the deep end of the water and also getting over your head where they are drowning versus standing on the shore and going, good luck, you're going to make it, and waving to them from a distance, or standing on the deck of the ship and finding your own solid, safe place to stand and have grounding and tossing them a life preserver. It is finding our own place to stand in and how we understand and make sense out of suffering. The questions of theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? Where is a good God when it hurts? Or whatever it is that existentially you question about why suffering occurs in this world and how we're to understand and make sense of it. How we find meaning. Find your own place to stand that lets you be steady and grounded so that you don't get too tossed too far, or in our anxiety and discomfort, step back too far away from their pain. It is about being present with them in the midst of their hope. If you've heard of Brene Brown, Renee but with a B, University of Houston School of Social Work researcher and professor, and she researched shame and vulnerability for a decade and then did a TED Talk that went viral and did another one that went viral, and they remain to be some of the most watched TED Talks in history. And she is phenomenal, has written a lot of books and lectures widely. I was hearing her interviewed on Being with Krista Tippett on NPR, and yes, many of you are like, oh, Krista, I love her. It was a great interview. So November of 2012, they were talking about a lot of things, but they touched on the idea of helicopter parenting. And Brene said, yeah, we think we help our kids when we smooth the way out for them, but really we handicap them when we do that. We help them best, and she quoted the work of C.R. Snyder out of Bowling Green, who's now deceased, but a researcher who studied hope, and she said, what Snyder found is that we think that hope is an emotion, and it's not. Hope is a cognitive behavioral construct that we develop when we face challenging circumstances. We have people around us who believe in our ability to find our way and make our way through. And then once we have found our way through the challenging circumstance, we have now built hope that the next time we face a challenging circumstance, we'll be able to handle it. Perceived threats, perceived efficacy, perceived support builds a better outcome. So hope is not something that we give them. We can't impose our meaning on their pain. We can't, the theologizing, cliches, platitudes, all of that we need to avoid. But to be present with and hear them and be present with them in the midst of their pain and be able to say, I hear you, I hear you, is what can be especially empowering. I trust you to find your way through, but while you do, you are not alone. We are with you, and we will be with you every step of the way. We have your back. It makes a difference. So again, the power of attunement and presence, the power of being mindful of our own attachment styles, giving them that safe place, gives them a safe place to struggle and wrestle with what they need to deal with. It gives them a safe place to ask open questions and to find new meaning and to find their own healing. And so we cannot avoid this part and aspect of our care that is so important, that makes a difference for us and our compassion fatigue. It increases our compassion satisfaction, which is a huge protective factor against compassion fatigue. It keeps us from burning out, and it also enhances our ability to serve them. So many of you may have seen these. They're talked about further in the Back and Arnold book that are some protocols for delivering challenging conversation. I'm not going to go through these, but these are some of the mnemonics that we could follow that help us know how to be present and how to deliver bad news. But I say we need to go not just with these, we need to step back even further, because I can have this script memorized, but if I'm still worried about what's going on at home, or the meeting I have in an hour, or the documentation I still need to do and it's 9:30 and I've still got plenty of emails I need to answer, or if I'm still angry about the last interaction or the person who cut me off in traffic, whatever energy I bring with me into that interaction, I can follow this to a T, that if I'm not really present, it's not going to make a dadgum bit of difference. And so how do we really do this? And so, in short, we speak less. The more I know as a provider, the less I find that I say in interactions with patients and families. I walk into a room as a chaplain and people expect me to say, oh, this is a good thing, this is God's will, and have platitudes and sermons. And instead I walk in and I say, this sucks. And they go, her badge says chaplain. And then they go, their shoulders relax and drop, and they heave a sigh of relief, and they drop the Sunday school language, and they go, you know what, you're right, it does. And then they tell me what's really, really going on. And those wind up being about the only 2 words I say the entire interaction. I'm just present for them to share their story and have someone join them in it. Speak less, breathe more. One of my favorite writers, who can be incredibly spiritual and irreverent all in the same sentence, including dropping the F-bomb, is Anne Lamott. And she says, I want to be where my butt is. And I've adapted that a bit to say, I want my brain, my breath, and my butt in the same place at the same time. And if they're not, there's a problem. And I need to go find a way to say, here are my feet. Okay, yeah, there's my butt. I know where I'm sitting. Oh, yeah, there's my breath. All right. I've got them all in the same place at the same time. I'm really here now. It just takes a few seconds. But we continually can practice coming back to that space to make certain that we're really, really there, and not in the past and not in the future, and not worried and not carrying things with us. We'll talk about a few tips at the very end for practical ways, practical rituals you can work in to bring more mindfulness into your daily practice. And so we notice what's going on in and coming up inside of us, and we pay attention and we're attuned to what's going on with them. Now, let's take some time to practice that. For the sake of time, I'm going to have us do this. I'm going to invite us, if you would please, to let's have 60 seconds of silence. I will time us, so you will not need to, but let's just take 60 seconds in silence together, please, and then we'll go from there. Okay, thank you. Babies are good teachers for us when it comes to breathing. They haven't yet learned about muffin tops. They haven't yet decided to get anxious and lock down their torso and breathe from their chest in short, rapid breathing that looks a little like stream soaking or agonal breathing. They haven't done that yet, which doing that, the chest breathing, actually makes us anxious, even if we aren't. When we do the good, deep belly breathing, we're not afraid to show our belly and we're not afraid trying to suck in our gut. When we just do the good, deep belly breaths and let our torso expand, oh, wow. That in and of itself can help us immediately get grounded and present and embodied. Now, I'm going to ask, if you would please, to, without having anything between you, to find a partner and turn towards each other. It's a little difficult in this space, but I'll give you a couple seconds to partner up and turn to face them as much as you can. Again, with nothing between you. Now, I'm going to invite us again to be in silence. This time, if you would, with your partner, maintain eye contact. Yeah, I know. Wait, she said she wants to do what? Do we hear her right? I need to go to the bathroom. Is that my pager? Pager, I'm dating myself. Okay, so maintaining eye contact with your partner in silence for 2 minutes. Oh, yeah, sorry, I changed the rules. Okay. Whew, okay, psych yourself up. Are you ready? All right, I'll let us know when it's time. 3, 2, remember to breathe. 1, go. Okay. All right, please join me in taking a big deep breath in and out. One more big deep breath in. Okay, I am not blowing smoke up your skirt. And the dozens and dozens and dozens of times I have done this, y'all are the best. Y'all really, that was beautiful. I mean it. They're often the giggles for the first 10 or 15 seconds. Sometimes longer. Sometimes you hold it in for the first 15 or 30 and then you're like, I can't do this. And you do the, But there'll be the giggles. Oftentimes there'll be tears. You may have noticed you or your partner getting misty-eyed. Again, it's a vulnerable thing to be seen. And to not just be seen, but to really be seen. It can be uncomfortable and scary. Do I have a booger hanging on my nose? What are they thinking about me? Do they like me? I can't do this, but they're going to think I suck if I look away. And I mean, vulnerability and intimacy are so hard, and yet it's what, as providers, we are invited to do with every interaction, with every patient and every family member, is to practice that kind of intimacy and connection and vulnerability. Now, here's the next exercise. You're like, I thought we were through. Could that not be the worst of it, please? With your partner, decide who's going to go first, who's going to talk first. You're like, to go do what? Tell us and we'll decide. Who's going to talk first? Y'all decided? Okay, again, with nothing between you, this is your task. For the person, and we're going to condense this for the sake of time, so I've got a little more content to give to you, and I want to honor our time. For the person who is speaking, share one of the most fun experiences you've ever had. Fun experiences you've ever had. For the person who's listening, this is your task. No responses. No verbal responses. Not even, oh, ooh, mm-hmm. None of that. No facial expressions, no. No responses. No verbalizations, vocalizations, movements. Just exude presence, eye contact, and listen to their story. For 60 seconds. Go. All right, that is time. Take about 5 seconds to wrap up your story, please, and then turn back this way. All right, please join me in taking another big deep breath in. And a deep breath out. Another deep breath in. Another breath out. And one last deep breath. I know we're not finished. One more deep breath in. Now some of you are yawning. Okay, Thank you. And usually we take about 3 minutes for this, but I want to do one other thing, and then we're going to talk about it. Switch roles. If you were the listener, you're now the speaker, and vice versa. Listeners, same instructions. Speakers, as you feel comfortable, the invitation is to share a not-so-fun experience. Okay? I'll give you a 10-second heads up before the end of time. Ready? Go. Okay, take 10 seconds to wrap up, please. And that is time. All right. If you will extend your thanks to your partner and then come back this way. And one last time, take a big deep breath in with me, please. And a breath out. Another one in. And out. So, what did you notice it was like to be the speaker? Good? So, felt like they were there? That someone was listening to you, and you knew someone was listening. I hear some who say, especially when we do it for 2 or 3 minutes, I don't know the last time someone's actually listened to me for 3 whole minutes without interrupting in my entire life. What's really fun is when spouses are in the room and they're sitting next to each other. That's always fun, in both extremes. What else did you notice as the speaker? For some, it's comforting. Others, it's disconcerting. Yes, sir. You were more aware of your own words because you knew that they were really being heard. So there was no response. You were making certain that he was really getting what you were saying. Okay. For some, it's disconcerting. I don't know if they're getting me. I don't know if they're hearing and understanding me because I'm not getting the And so that can be disconcerting. Yes. Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay. So the struggle, so when there's a lack of emotion coming toward you, you may go into more reporting mode rather than coming into emotion yourself to share the story. Okay, so some emotive response can be helpful in letting the speaker know that it's okay to have emotion themselves. So the practice of this is not to teach you as clinicians to sit and be the tabula rasa and just, yeah, that's going to freak people out. You'll have my experience of, is he there? Is he listening? Is it Asperger's? What's going on with him? I did not know what was up with that surgeon, but so the invitation is this, to notice that when we do this in a longer period of time, people often say, especially during the not-so-fun story, and thank y'all for being willing to be vulnerable with each other and be safe space to practice that. Be willing to go there. That during the sharing of the not-so-fun story, they find that they go deeper more quickly with someone probably not very well known to them than they ever would have imagined. Because when we do go, oh yeah, I had that, when we do interrupt the flow of someone's story, they don't go as deep, as far, as quickly, share as much. So the invitation is to wait. If you find yourself wanting to step in some way, vocally, with facial expressions, verbalizations, whatever, with touch, make certain, pause, wait. Wait stands for why am I talking? Wait and ask yourself, am I saying or doing this right now because it's what they need? Do they need me to express a little emotion so they can feel like they can shift out of reporter mode and really let themselves have some emotion here? Do they need to have a little more from me? Or am I doing this because I'm uncomfortable and I'm seeking to fill the space? Or I'm in a hurry and I'm trying to get them to wrap this up. So noticing what's going on inside of you and noticing how the responses that we give, or when we give them space, how it might open up room for them to be willing and feel comfortable to share more. So I would love to play along those lines, but I want to get us there. I promise to give you a few rituals, and I'll take a couple of questions, and then I know we need to wrap up. Find places to debrief before you go into having a conversation, and afterward. Find safe space to debrief and say, how did that go? How did I do? This worked, this didn't. Find rituals to do for yourself. When you walk through a doorway, imagine that there's a force field or a waterfall, and let the energy of previous interactions come off of you as you go through that door and into that next interaction. When you come out of that interaction, do the same thing. Don't carry the energy of interactions with you. Go in clean to each interaction. How many times a day are we using hand sanitizer and washing our hands? And so for the 10 seconds it takes for the alcohol to evaporate, for the 25 seconds that we're under the faucet, instead of singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat through twice to make sure you do it long enough, or singing the happy birthday song through twice, how about instead if we get our brain, our breath, and our butt in the same place at the same time? Have I breathed recently? Have I sucked in my gut? Is my chest tight? Where are my feet? Have I taken a drink of water recently? Have I peed recently? Have I not peed because I'm not drinking water? Because I don't want to have to stop and pee because I don't feel like I have time? Get present and get with yourself and get where you are. And take those few moments to really let the waters have a healing moment for you to bring you back fully present. The badge ritual, when you leave your shift, debrief all you need to about your day. And then once you take off your badge, put it someplace special. Cup holder, glove box, the ashtray your kid made in 5th grade camp that you can't throw away, that still sits on your desk. Put it someplace special. But when you take off that badge, make a commitment to take off all the energy, worries, interactions of the day off too, and hand patients and families over into the hands of the folks who are caring for them in that moment. And so don't carry those interactions with you. Make a commitment to yourself and your loved ones to really be off work. That means no checking emails, no checking phone unless you're on call. And some of you, that's a constant state. But find safe space to offload. Trust folks into others' hands. You don't have to be on 24/7 most often for them. And so find a way, and don't pick up the worries and cares about patients and families until you put the badge back on. Find ways to take care of yourself. I'll take a couple of quick questions if there are any, and if not, then I'll wrap us up. I know we're at time and folks need to move on. And I'll be around later on during the symposium. Thank you for your time. Thank you. I hope that something has been helpful, and I won't take time to read through this because I know we need to close, but there's a reading here called A Place of Refuge by Rachel Naomi Remen. So I highly recommend you're getting access to the slides and taking a read through that reading later. It talks about silence being God's lap, and being a place of refuge for patients and families to go through what they need to, but to know that while they do, that they are not alone. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you.